Hello and welcome to the Dublin Arsenal preview show. I'm your host, Jonathan Giles. On the preview show tonight, I'm joined by regular guest Eamonn Donnelly and by Spurs fan Dermot to look ahead to the 197th North London derby against Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham Hotspur side at the Emirates Stadium, live on TNT Sports this coming Wednesday at 8 p.m. And remember to check out our show on the Dublin Arsenal YouTube channel. So sit back and enjoy the show. As I said in my intro, I'm joined by my regular guest, Schooner season ticket holder, Eamon Donnelly. How are you, pal?
Evening, Jonathan. Evening, Dermot. Tonight's show is all about doubt. Or is it? I haven't made up my mind yet. I like self-deprecating humour. I'm just not very good at it. Yeah, I'm, um, I'm all good. Yeah, waiting with the keenest anticipation for another North London derby nightmare. I hate this. Anyway, you know.
197 now and counting. Also joined by Spurs fan Dermot, who was on back in September for our preview show. How are you, Dermot? You keeping well?
Keep well, yeah, not too bad. Not necessarily looking forward to the game, which I think is exactly what I said last time, but it's even worse this time around.
It's great to have your optimism, Dermot, like ourselves. It should be a cracker on Wednesday night. The North London record to date, Arsenal have had the most wins with 83. Most player appearances is Eamon's favourite player. Get on with it, David O'Leary with 35.
As I say, I always enjoyed playing against Tottenham. They're a good club in a good area, good people, as I say, and all credit to them for building the new shopping centre and the stadium. Well done to Dermot and all the lads.
Top scorer is Mr. Hardy Kane with 14. And the all-time record stands at Arsenal with 83 wins, Spurs is 61 and 52 draws thrown in there as well. First things first, Dermot, what have you made of your season so far to date and your January transfers into particular? Antonin Kinski, the goalkeeper. He looks like a bit of a signing, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think probably start with the keeper. I mean, he looked really good against Liverpool, and he had
Yeah.
a decent game at the weekend as well against they were at Tamworth on the road for the FA Cup. So the cup fixtures in the last week or so were kind of a good improvement on what had been going on up to that point, let's say. So no, he looks good, and I'm probably expecting him to start on Wednesday, and they're definitely going to need him to kind of keep the good run going. Yeah, the season it's been pretty rough. I mean, you're looking at 12th in the table. That is not where you want to be. And I mean, the last 8 games, there's one win, which was Southampton away, which is absolutely dreadful. Um, yeah, I think since they beat City, it's been a desperate run. I think 5 points out of Arsenal 24, and really part of that has been a case that they're conceding an awful lot of goals. That's some pretty embarrassing defeats at home to Chelsea and Liverpool in that run.
Yeah.
And a big part of that as well has been the injuries. So obviously Vicario was your first choice keeper out. They've kind of addressed that in the January window already, and are probably looking at a couple more signings if they can. Specifically, the centre back issues have been absolutely killing them. And young Archie Gray's been playing centre back for them, has played well. He's been good, but he's a natural midfielder. And while he looks great on the ball, etc., he's completely out of position. And I think part of that has taken some pressure off of Postecoglou, despite the fact that the results have been poor, and put more of an emphasis on the club general kind of hierarchy, and specifically Mr. Levy on that perspective. But I think that we're kind of heading into, as well as this game, a run afterwards where they're playing Everton and Leicester, I think, coming up in the Premier League, where if they don't get some wins out of those games, I think it could be in serious trouble. And right now, the cup runs, specifically a second leg coming up against Liverpool in the Carling Cup, or not the Carling Cup now, whatever it's the League Cup, is possibly the only thing that might be keeping them in the job, depending
Yeah.
on how this next couple of weeks goes.
Yeah, I think the 1-0 League Cup victory over Liverpool there last week, and you bet Tamworth in extra time in the FA Cup. They made it a bit difficult for you. Do you think those two victories has given us, as you said yourself, as it eased a bit of pressure on Postecoglou with the board?
Yeah, it probably has, but I mean, I think part of the issue with it as well is because they're cup fixtures, and with the Liverpool game, there's a second leg to come, albeit it's not for basically another kind of 3 weeks or maybe kind of a monthish. They have that one kind of on tap, but the it's the Premier League results and where they're on the table. It's going to be a real issue for them. If you're trying to find some optimistic side, there's some players due back from injury, including the two centre backs, and at some stage in February, maybe Vicario as well in net. And indeed, then some pretty winnable fixtures after this one. But the key thing is that, I mean, I think they've put in better performances in those cup games. They looked pretty decent against Liverpool, albeit they weren't at their best. So I think if they put in a good showing against Arsenal, that will at least kind of keep them going into those games against Leicester and Everton, where they have to be getting some points and some wins. I think otherwise, what they can't afford to do is get embarrassed against Arsenal. Surprisingly, though, they're a peculiar team, Spurs. They've scored a lot of goals, but they actually don't concede many on the road. They concede an awful lot more goals at home.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting aspect to it. But I mean, you're probably looking at this thinking there's much more likely that they might nick a draw than get a win here. But yeah, as I say, what they just can't afford to do is just get embarrassed. Because the Liverpool games and the Chelsea ones at home were particularly kind of chastening watches.
Yeah, it's kind of aiming briefly. It's kind of like risk and reward football for Spurs. They score a lot and really do concede a lot as well. Attractive, I suppose, on the eye, being a Spurs fan, end-to-end football, but you're eventually found out, I suppose. But Eamonn, what's your take on Spurs season so far yourself?
Sure, you can't predict Spurs. It's like it's like trying to predict the outcome of a pinball championship. Like it's I've seen more of Spurs this year than probably any other season, and they are capable of playing. They're a great watch.
They're exciting. Yeah.
Now they're a great watch. You tune into them and you're hoping that they do something against Liverpool there before Christmas, and it was like a tennis game. But like that being said, they're very, very difficult to predict because of the type of football they play. And you know what? We haven't been able to buy a break all season. Leg breaks is all we get. But Tottenham aren't far behind in that regard. They haven't had much luck this season. Um, I reckon your man. I was looking at the Tamworth game. That was a plastic pitch. I reckon the guy, the groundsman, and Tamworth was saying, Tamworth is up near Birmingham. All right, what's this? Liquid soap. Let's stick that in the house. Whatever they put on the pitch, it was like the ice skating championship. It's supposed to be an all-weather pitch, and the players were sitting all over the place. I mean, that in no more in a different way, our game would have taken a lot out of us at the weekend. But so with that game in Tamworth, imagine Postecoglou if they'd have lost that game.
Yeah, the pressure would have been
Right.
on them. Yeah.
But that being said, looking at the way, look, derbies are derbies, and they take a life of their own. But I think Spurs will sniff out that we're vulnerable at the moment, and I think he'll go for us, right? And I'm hoping that he does, because if he does, well, then I've been bemoaning about the fact that we've been playing the game. I was saying, Dermot, on some of the shows that we've been playing the game like our players are in a bit of a comfort zone, and I don't mean a comfort zone as in not trying. I mean a tactical comfort zone where we're keeping safe possession. When I'm telling you, against Tottenham, if they come after you, that's exactly what you need to do. You need to get control of the pitch, get organised on the pitch, decide you're not going to go after them, let them come after you, but get control in certain areas of the pitch and put a bit of order on the game. If you get into this slugfest with them, they'll hurt you. I mean, Kulusevski is playing the best football I've seen him play. They're all over the gaff at the back. This is a classic case of they've no backs and we've no forwards.
Yeah.
So, you don't know what way it's going to go, but I just think it's a game that we need to get control of in the middle of the pitch, get control in territory, and neutralize any ideas that they might have. Because I'll tell you what they did to Man City that day. We know Man City were in a kind of they were kind of completely warped in whatever they were trying to do. But Tottenham absolutely carved them up. And now they had their two central defenders that day as well, Dermot, that they don't have now. And I think they're missing them a lot. Like Romero, and for all his madness, is a good central defender, and Van der Veen is a fine central defender. I don't know about Natasha Kinski in goal. Uh, we, we've seen only a very, very small sample size, but you'd hope that their inability to defend set pieces will come to bite them a little bit. Look, to be honest with you, it's still a bit raw after losing to Man U over the weekend, but I just think this is a game that we've got to get by the scruff of the neck, tight control, and try and win it 1 or 2-0. Put a bit of order on things, you know.
Just to go into the match preview in a bit more depth, just to give it a taster. Sports league position, as Dermot said earlier on, played 20, won 7, drew 3, lost 10 in 12 and with 24 points. Top scorer for Spurs currently is James Maddison with 8 goals, followed by Brennan Johnson, Dominic Solanke with 7, Kulisevsky with 5, and also Song Young-min with 5 goals. Injuries coming into this game for ourselves: Ben White, Gabriel Jesus, which looked nasty yesterday. We know Saka's out till March. Eden and Weirdy and Tommy Yasu, God knows when he'll be back. For Spurs, Lenti.
Sorry, Jonathan, I think you can add Yuri and Timber onto that as well.
Yeah, probably wouldn't be fair off as well. Just for good measure. For Spurs,
Oh, but what that means, like in terms of analysis, is we're gonna have to rob Peter to pay Paul again, and take our best midfielder Thomas Partey and put him at right fullback, and it's a disaster.
Yeah,
we don't lose one player in per position.
We lose 3 in one position. Yeah. For Spurs, it's like ourselves: Bentancur, Romero, Udogi, Davis, Forster, Vicario, that's 2 keepers for you. Van de Ven, Richarlison, and Odegaard are all out for yourselves. Of course, our last meeting, Dermot, was the 1-0 at your own ground. Gabriel with that header, powerful header. Briefly, what was your take on that game, Dermot?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to it now, but I mean, it was a disappointing one. As Eamonn mentioned, I think it was another one of the games where we kind of said something similar in relation to the set pieces. I mean, Spurs remain bad at defending them, and Arsenal are quite good at attacking them, so they're going to target that area on Wednesday as well. I'd be really shocked if they aren't going for that, and particularly given that they're actually down bodies in terms of centre backs. In terms of that game, I mean, Arsenal probably were comfortable enough at White Hart Lane. It was a case of if I recall, Spurs had a decent amount of the ball and couldn't really create a lot with it. That's been a bit of a theme on the road.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily sure if this is one of those sort of games. I mean, what I do think will probably happen is that it might look a bit like the Nottingham Forest game they played at Christmas. On St. Stephen's Day, in terms of Spurs actually having quite a decent amount of the ball and maybe getting plenty of attacks going, but maybe struggling to break Arsenal down if they sit deep. But at the same time, I don't know if Arsenal are necessarily a team that want to be sitting too deep and how much their fans are going to love watching that at home. So it might be a case that they want to try and be a bit more attacking and maintain possession themselves, but that's where they kind of run that risk, as Eamonn says, of getting into a little bit of a tennis match with Spurs, and that might suit them. So it's a difficult one to kind of see what that's going to look like, but I probably expect that there might be a case that, not to say there's a game of two halves as a cliche, but I mean, you could get something like that where Spurs have a dominant spell in one of the halves and Arsenal are riding out and maybe playing better in the other. That would be sort of the guess. I mean, other than that, really, I think if Spurs can nick a goal, they'll fancy getting something out of the game, because I think Arsenal are struggling to score beyond corners. They miss Saka big time, kind of watching it from kind of a neutral perspective. But beyond that, I mean, I think if Spurs can get something on the road, that they can be a sort of team that can get going then, because they won't they won't sit back at all. They will press forwards with a bit of abandon, and if they can get lucky and nick one or two, then it can become, you can get a hand for the other team. We've seen that with not just City, but I mean Arsenal, United earlier in the year as well, where the game in Old Trafford was, made a bit of a show on them on the road there. So they're a funny sort of team where you might maybe expect more of them on the road than at home at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose.
Dermot, they play too close to the halfway line at home.
Yeah,
way too close, don't they? Yeah,
it's a
very high line.
I actually think both teams, the line that they'll play will be somewhere between the edge of their own area and the centre circle, right? That they'll set up a line that is kind of 30, 35 yards from their own goal. But I think both teams will set up that way, right?
So, and that's why I say, well, then the battle is the spaces that people get into in that middle third of the pitch, and we've
Yeah.
got to get on top in there. And that's why Declan has to start now on Wednesday. You know.
Yeah, and even when to yourself, Dermot, sorry, when Ange Postecoglou comes out, he's very honest in interviews post match. He
Possibly
says,
too
"Well,
much, yeah.
probably too much, but yeah, well, can hear me. Yeah, you live by your words, I suppose. But like, there's kind of he wants to play entertaining football, and he wants to give fans value for their money, and there's nothing better than seeing attacking football and plenty of goals. But do you think sometimes yourself as a fan, do you think you might, should you hold back a bit and look at the bigger picture? Should you defend a bit more in games, against the top teams and not be opened up? What do you feel yourself? Do you think that kind of style of play works against, with no disrespect to the lesser teams? Do
Yeah, no, I think you're on something there, because I mean, there's definitely a feeling that maybe not so much from a fan perspective, but from a neutral kind of critical perspective, that
yeah,
there's just no pragmatic streak at all. A lot of the games the Spurs have managed to win this year, games where they've had more than a goal lead, and in games where they've only had a 1 goal lead, they've fairly regularly lost them. There was a game against Wolves over Christmas where exactly that day they were ahead 2-1, and trying to retain it, and they're just not very good at doing it. Um, Part of why that's helpful, though, I think, in some respects, is because of the fact that they have the injuries with centre back. It means that they kind of know they're not going to be able to kind of try and sit
yeah,
on a lead, or hold it and then all draw. So they are a team that you feel like if they're going somewhere, they're going to go and attempt to play ball, because they know they can't just attempt to squeak out a result, or a tight one, And so in that sense, you can feel pretty confident that they're going to really push high, whether they should or shouldn't. It seems like the only thing they have in the bag. At some point, that might come back to bite in terms of Postecoglou, in terms of if they're at the end of the season and they don't finish anywhere near where they want to be in the table, that could end up costing him his job, that kind of lack of a pragmatic streak. But for the moment, like I said, I think because of the nature of the kind of injuries and the lack of depth, I mean, it does mean that they're essentially just doubling down on what they do.
yeah,
And it's slightly more excusable for the fans because of the kind of circumstances. When the defenders Van de Ven and Romero come back, should they fit towards the end of the month, if it's still a case that they look absolutely ragged at the back, I think then it could be a case that they could be in real trouble, unless they start to do a bit of a run and climb the table a bit. But in terms of this game, I really do think that you're probably not going to see a whole lot of that pragmatic streak at all.
Do you think? Yeah, just going to that as well, Dermot. Do you think he will play? Do you think he'll play that? That style of football. That attacking football at the Emirates, or do you think he'd be a bit more, cautious? Do you think he has that thinking in him, or do you think
No,
they'll
I think they will
they'll
definitely press
go
up
for it?
and go for
Yeah,
it, and possibly run a little bit too high of a line.
yeah,
I think on Spurs end of things, the instant questions are going to be, what sort of a midfield they decide to select, and that's chopped and changed a lot this year. And they do have one or two people out. And Bentancur is back from a sort of as you'll be aware, a needless sort of ban, and has actually gotten some injuries since he came back. But when he
yeah,
was briefly playing, it looked like a more settled group with him in there. A few of the young players have looked really impressive in terms of Bergvall in midfield too. Looks like he can play a little bit, but they just can't decide on a midfield that gives them any sort of a safer structure in terms of just being run through. So it'll be interesting to see what they try and do on that front. They certainly look to be more cognizant of that for the Liverpool game before Bentancur went out without the concussion. So what way they set up on that front will be interesting, because that is an area of strength for Arsenal, especially if it's the case that Rice is playing. They're going to be really worried about being overrun there. And then there's kind of been a constant kind of battle as to who's the number 10. Kulusevski is winning that at the moment in terms of being in great form, but Madison does give you plenty. So it's kind of a case of, do you decide to bring him off the bench? And part of the reason why they don't just play Madison on the right wing is essentially because Brennan Johnson's in good goal scoring form too. So there are some positives in this, and they do carry a bit of threat and have some speed on the counter Spurs. But it'll be interesting to see what way they look to kind of line up against Arsenal tactically in that perspective. And as Eamonn says, it's a little bit difficult to predict, to be honest.
There's one player that is her Achilles heel in the North London derby. It was Harry Kane previously, but Son Heung-min, he always seems to score, doesn't he, Eamonn? At the Emirates in particular.
I'm going to actually bring him to IKEA one day and flat pack his head into a wardrobe.
He's just one of those annoying, You know he's going to pop up and do something.
Yeah,
So
always like and he gets way over. But I slightly disagree with Dermot on. Dermot would know. You'd know a lot more about your friends if you watch Tottenham more than I would. But every time I see Kulusevski doing his best work, it's on the right hand side there. You know.
Mm.
he's a great
Yeah,
lad.
he's a
He's
sort of
really
he's a
good.
natural winger, and he likes coming in on that
Yeah,
left foot.
Yeah,
He's not fast,
yeah,
dribbler,
yeah.
a peculiar one because they do seem keen to start him in that midfield spot. And as I said, I think part of the issue is that Brennan Johnson is very much a right-sided forward, so they do want him out there, but he is more
and
of
Timo
a sort of
Werner as
wide
well.
forward.
Dermot. Timo Werner, he hasn't really. He had a good season last season. Was it Leipzig he came from? But he hasn't
Mm.
really clicked. Do you think you're still to see the best of him in a sports jersey in terms of goals in particular?
I don't think so. I mean,
No.
he's a player that has in the past been good in many respects, except for he can't put the ball in the net. But this
Yeah.
season he hasn't done anything, including not put the ball in the net, and has been pretty publicly criticised for it. So I
Yeah.
think the nature of the deal he's on is it's a loan again with a buy a part of it. So it seems unlikely they're going to pick that up at the end of the year. And he's had a tough season. To some extent,
Yeah.
you feel for the guy because he also looks like his head's a bit melted. Which is unfortunate, and sometimes you go through these runs, but he really has had a desperate run between Chelsea and Spurs in terms of his goal scoring, and he does look like a player who's lacking a bit of confidence,
He
despite
probably
having.
needs to go back to Germany. You know.
Yeah, I think Leipzig is probably his fit aim, and isn't it?
Where you see, you were mentioning that Dermot was mentioning that uh, the pragmatic bits and bobs. You have to understand, like Spurs fans' DNA is a bit mad. Like, no, but no. In fairness, no. I'm not having a go here. Like, for as long as I've known Spurs, they've they've kind of traded off on being a cavalier, play good football, entertain the crowd team. Because the team that won the double in 1961
Yeah.
did exactly that, right? Pass and move, pass and move. They started all that stuff, right? And they were pioneers in that kind of push and run, pass and move, overlapping fullback type of game. And that's in the Spurs fans' DNA. And sometimes when they get a bit of pragmatism, they kind of they get bored with it, you know. I'll give you one case in point. They hired George Graham at one stage, and they hated him. Well, because he was a gooner, but he won them a bloody trophy. They've only won 2 trophies in 40 years. He won one of them,
The
you
League
know.
Cup. Yeah, that's
They
right. Yeah.
they didn't like that pragmatic approach that George had.
Yeah.
And just in case people don't know their history, Arsenal are a South London club,
Originally, yeah.
originally from Woolwich,
Yeah.
right? And not only did we land on Tottenham's doorstep in 1913, we also bought our way into the top division and got Tottenham relegated as a result. You know,
Just
so
for good measure.
from a Tottenham perspective, like this crowd of upstarts from Woolwich landed on our doorstep and then bought us out of the bloody division. So it starts there, you know. Um,
Yeah.
but look, I think Postecoglou was a really good football guy. I love his sense of humour, and you know when I got real respect from when somebody put it to him last season, um, would they throw the game against Man City?
Yeah.
And the genuine reaction he gave to that said a lot to
He's the
me
man. Yeah.
about him. But I also loved when he was getting a lot of board from the crowd there a few weeks ago, and he went over to them and they said, "Well, what were you doing going over?" I said, "Oh, my hearing wasn't great, man. They were making a few points. I went over to hear them better, you know." Like, but that has balls, you know. Yeah, yeah. Fairness.
He's loving angels instead. It's the
Yeah.
same shit, isn't it? In terms of previous meetings, going back to last September, 2-2. Romero, OJ, and Saka with a penalty, and Son, the man who always seems to pop up, got two for Spurs that day. In 22, 3-1, Party scored a screamer that day. Jesus and Granit Xhaka, and of course Harry Kane had to get a penalty against us that day. And then in 21, this is our last one from the Embers. Me and Smith Rowe, Aubameyang, and Saka And of course, Sanya Min had to get his customary goal against the Arsenal. Were you at all 3 games, Eamon, at the Emirates for them ones?
No, I was at the first one you mentioned. That wasn't long after COVID, and I remember. I think Spurs missed the penalty after they got the 3-1, and we were hanging on.
Might be right, Eamon. Yeah.
Yeah, the second one I was at, Granite Jackets got a great goal that day. The stadium lifted that day. That was great. And for last year's one, I was in the River Bar on the 2-all draw. So Tottenham were very good that day. We went ahead with a penalty, and then Jorginho fell over the ball. Yeah.
It was unfortunate. I say Dermot enjoyed that one, did you, when you saw Jorginho Son picking it up? I think it was Madison and Son done a 1-2, didn't they? I think Madison. Yeah. What has been, just briefly, Dermot, what's been your best memories of the North London Derby? What game sticks out for you, obviously, as a sports fan?
I think I might have said this for the return one, but yeah, it's always some of the Kane goals in it, especially during that run they had with Richie Pochettino, are definitely kind of the best days. They've not always had the best time against Arsenal with some of the other managers that have been in, and even during the kind of recent stints. Just to, talk about the what Eamonn was saying about Spurs fans not being big fans of pragmatism. I mean, we sort of kind of collectively forgotten about the fact that Antonio Conte and Mourinho were managers, and that those were desperate runs where there was some promise, but they played awful ball and no one was interested in it whatsoever. But yeah, it's definitely, in terms of best memories, it's going back to those the Poch run where he had a couple of good days out against Arsenal. I don't think at any point he actually managed to win a game at the Emirates. Those are mostly home wins, but some of those matches now were really brilliant.
Yeah, I remember the one that keeps giving me nightmares. It was, I think it might be 07-08 the League Cup game. I think he battered us 5-1. That still gives me nightmares, that game. Eamonn,
was it a 4-4 at one point around that time?
It was a 4. Yeah, I think Aaron Lennon and Jermaine Jennings, we were 4-2 up, and I think it was Gay Gleeshy slipped and Lennon ran in and somehow curled it past Mooney. That might have been the night David Bentley scored that screamer, wasn't it, as well, from the halfway line?
David Bentley's got the screamer in the 4-all draw.
Yeah, so
that
night.
Yeah, that was the opening goal of the night, actually. Yeah.
Was an ex-Schooner scoring against
Almunia, and do you remember that in their place, Danny Rowe scored one from, I think he scored one from Tottenham Hale. He hit it,
rocket. It was
it went through Almunia's hands. He didn't even save it on the way back out.
I remember actually going back as well, another screamer at Wire Lane for ourselves, Thomas Rosicki.
Oh, that was a great goal.
Oh, what a finish.
Yeah.
Took it off the foot of Chamberlain, I think it was. Yes, that's and Adebayor when he chipped it up on his chest, and I think it was Paul Robinson in goal. Fabregas scored a screamer. I think it was 3-1 that day as well. There's one thing that will be guaranteed on Wednesday night, lads, and that's goals in this fixture. There's always, and it's always.
That's a nil all written all over it, so.
Eamonn just has to be the party pooper. I told you, stop drinking that Camden Ale. You're getting negative. It's rocket fuel, though. You have to try it there. It's absolutely rocket fuel.
Hell's bells.
Yeah. Hand on heart, Dermot. What prediction for yourselves on Wednesday night?
Oof, I'm gonna attempt to be positive about it and swing a 1-1 draw. I think if they get a point out of this, it will be a good result. Because even though Arsenal have been struggling a little bit themselves, Spurs' run has been desperate. And I think if they can do anything to just get some points on the board would be important. And as I say, it's just to get something positive heading into that run of pretty crucial fixtures coming up.
Yeah, do you think it beats that tight of a game, Dermot? Yeah, you see it as a 1-1, yeah.
No, I think that's swinging positive. I mean, I'm hoping it's a chaotic game and that would suit Spurs, but I could see it. I mean, either it's a case that as I say, swinging positive would be a draw, or maybe if they can put in a performance like they did against Liverpool, they could nick a win. But I think it's unlikely, and I think it's probably more likely that Arsenal probably have the better of it. But I'm hoping that's not the case. But maybe I like the misery.
You can't beat an optimistic man. Eamonn, I'm sure you're heading over for this one, are you, on Wednesday night?
No, I'm not. No, because I'm going next Saturday, and I was there at the weekend. So I've still got a full-time job.
No, I think. Look, I think. To be honest with you, if the game pans out the way I think and hope it might, I think Arsenal will try and play with control and
Yeah,
not be worried about playing with emotion and not be worried about trying to create loads of chances early on. And if Arsenal play with that control, I think with Tottenham's defence, goals can come. And I'm hoping that we can come out of it with a 2-0. I think the more chaotic it is, I agree with them. But the more chaotic it is, the more it suits Spurs. So I'm hoping that we play with a bit of control and that the crowd understands that we got to be patient.
yeah, we're going through a bit of a
I
sticky
think I think if we
patch.
go after them helter skelter, we're playing into their hands.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Eamon. Yeah, you're opening yourself up. Yeah, but aside, I think as both sets of fans, I think we're in for the North London Derby is always a cracker.
Now, I
Of
just want to remind people before we close down that our league form, um, despite the fact that we're the worst team and ever the tug out like it, our league form in the last 9 games, 6 wins and 3 draws. Just to kind of put that in there. Yeah.
it's, it's not over till it's over. No, no, we're very much in it, and yeah, it wouldn't be right writing ourselves out. I'm sure there'll be another meltdown on Wednesday evening amongst ourselves.
We
But
can't keep a break, but we're going to have to be professional,
yeah,
not approach the game emotionally.
yeah,
Be
yeah,
professional. Use the structures that we have to control the game and go and bloody well win it. That's the way I see it.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure
Yeah.
both sets of fans, the Emirates under lights as well. You can't ask for any more on a Wednesday night, that's for sure. Um, as always, thanks my guest, Eamon Donnelly. Thanks, pal, for coming on as always, and also to Dermot. Thanks very much for taking your time out, pal. Catch our show on the Dublin Arsenal YouTube channel and also on Spotify when we'll have the review on Thursday evening. So until then, thanks for watching and listening. Thanks, lads.